Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining on this call. We'll get started in just about 30 seconds. I'm going to leave a few minutes for folks to jump in, and we'll kick off. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for this session today. Welcome to the 2020 tax season kickoff. We've got a few kind of guidelines and welcome tasks to take care of. So let's start off with those. Next slide, please. All right, housekeeping. So just a heads up that this webinar is going to be recorded. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. Speakers will be coming off and sharing their camera as I'm doing as they're speaking, but otherwise you'll only see the person presenting. You'll be able to add in questions and chat messages using the chat. So please drop any questions you have for the presenters and their presentation. There'll be a 5-minute section after each presentation to chat about, or to ask for the presenters to address questions and speak to anything that has risen up out of the conversation. Next slide, please. And if you have technical issues, you can email GoToMeeting@Prosperity Now. My name is Darren Liddell. I'm with the Taxpayer Opportunity Network. I'm really excited to facilitate this conversation. Next slide. And behind the scenes is the TON team, Justin Chu, who you all may know well, Olivia Harp, who's helping behind the scenes with this GoToMeeting, and then Graham O'Neill, who's been really key in both promoting and planning this event. Next slide, please. Additionally, there's the infamous, the famous Rebecca Thompson, but y'all get to speak with her in just a second. In today's agenda, we're going to cover welcome introductions. We're going to talk about tax season updates and hear from Irs Spec. We're going to talk about low-income taxpayer clinic engagement from the Center for Taxpayer Rights. We'll talk about the Filer Voter Act and nonprofit votes encouraging of using, helping folks register at the tax moment. And last thing is we'll talk about tax layer updates, next steps, and then close out. Next slide. All right, so with that, today's speakers are Rebecca Thompson from Prosperity Now. You all know her. She's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. Don Dill from Irs Spec. Nina Olson, who's the Executive Director of Center for Taxpayer Rights. Next slide. As well as Caitlin Donnelly, who's the Program Director of Nonprofit Votes. Craig Smith and Kim Manuel from TaxPayer as well. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to kick it to Rebecca to do a very quick introduction. Well, Rebecca, I can do an intro if you need to. I'll leave a space if you're able to jump in, or here. If not, I'll go ahead and kick us off. So with that, y'all, tax season is here, and tax season is a really busy time, a really amazing time to let taxpayers know about all the different things that are going on in their life, and in their financial lives in particular. It's a really key moment, helping folks get access to refunds. In this year, child tax credits will be bigger than ever. Child dependent care credit's been expanded. There'll be new software updates happening with many folks that are using TaxPayer, as well as there's a few new initiatives going on you'll hear about in this webinar. So this is meant to just be a time for you all to, us to gather as a field. We want you all to share best practices and ideas that you have in the chat, as well as please ask our presenters questions as well.
Darren?
All right, Rebecca, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We hear you now. Go ahead, loud and clear.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. Always with the tech difficulties. Just give me just 1 minute to say good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the 2022 tax season's kickoff. I hope that you are ready to go. We are certainly delighted to have you join us this afternoon. And we're here today in the hopes that you'll gain valuable insights that will help you and as you help others over the course of the next few months and in the years to come as well. Now, the last couple of filing seasons have been like really tumultuous at best. And this one, quite honestly, there's not much promise for things getting too much better. But there's one thing that I am sure of, and that is that our VITA partners and volunteers will always rise to the challenge year after year. And for that, I am so grateful to be a part of such a wonderful group of people. And also today, I would just want to take a moment to formally introduce you to the newest member of our team here at Prosperity Now, of the TON team, and that's Graham O'Neill. And this kind of marks the occasion for me to actually pass the baton to Graham. And we're so excited to have him here as a tax strategist, working with TON and getting to know you all and getting a lot closer to you all as partners in this work. Thank you all and enjoy the webinar. Graham?
Thanks, Rebecca. I just wanted to take a moment to say that I'm very excited to start this new opportunity and to work with all of our VITA partners across the country. I'm sure those of you on the listserv have started to see my name pop up on email replies, and I make sure to always include my email address at the end. So please reach out to me if you have any questions about anything VITA related, low-income taxpayer related, basically anything at all that you think you could use some help from Prosperity Now. Please reach out to us, to me in particular, and we'll be more than happy to help out and talk. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Graham. Now over to Don from IRS. Don, take us away.
Thank you, Darren. Appreciate that introduction. Don Dill, a senior tax analyst in Spec headquarters. For those I haven't had a chance to meet, welcome. I wanted to first and foremost thank Prosperity Now and our good friends at Taxpayer Opportunity Network for hosting this great event. I want to thank the other panelists. You're in for a real treat, some great information, and I thank them for taking their time to be part of this also. First and foremost, before I get started on some of my slides, I wanted to offer our deepest appreciation from the IRS and Spec for your dedication, your passion for this work, serving those in need when it comes to tax preparation. As Rebecca said, it has been a tumultuous couple seasons, and we thank you, and we can't say enough of appreciation for you hanging in through these challenging years. And as Rebecca noted, we were, like you, hopeful for a little bit more of a normal season, but it does not appear to be that in the offering, at least at the beginning. So we thank you again for your dedication to this work, for your passion for getting it done. I wanted to start off very front and say that we at the IRS and Spec are here as your partners to help you. So as you try to navigate this challenging season, please feel free and to reach out to your local Spec relationship managers for assistance, advice, whatever help they can offer. We're here to serve you, so please utilize that service. Second, I wanted to say, normally when I do these opening presentations, I think everybody says I normally provide you a challenge, and normally I say to you that our challenge this year and our focus and job number one is quality. And in this year, I do want to say that I have moved reluctantly quality down to 1B. And I do want to say on behalf of the IRS and Spec that we want you to know that we think the health of you as a partner, your volunteers and your taxpayers is more important than anything this season. So we offer our support in whatever decision you need to make to ensure the health and safety of each person that comes into your site, volunteer, taxpayer, or a worker at your site. So please keep that in the forefront of every decision you make. Of course, we would then say, once you've made sure everybody's safe, we do want to ensure that quality remains our top occupation within VITA. We all pride ourselves on doing correct tax returns, and really, as I remind people as often as I can, the gift we give to taxpayers is not completing their tax return for free, although it is a tremendous gift and helps them financially. To me, the real gift is doing a correct tax return, getting them the amount of refund they are entitled to, and quite frankly, keeping them out of IRS compliance checks down the road. It's going to be more critical than ever this year to to ensure quality. It's going to put a lot of pressure on you as a volunteer, your tax preparers, and I'm looking quite directly at the issue related to dependencies. And all I will say in my charge to you is that the issue of dependency, which is obviously critical this year as the child tax credit has expanded dramatically and has become very critical to helping individuals and children out of poverty. But I want you to know that dependency is an issue of law. It is not an issue of emotion, of who needs it more. And I will leave that up to you, but I challenge each of us to remember we have tax law training, we have documentation and support to help you make that decision. So again, on behalf of the IRS Inspect, thank you for all you do, and I look forward to serving as many people as we can. And we all know that demand is in highest levels of we have seen in years. So thank you for your work. I'll jump down to the next slide. Actually, the next one, I apologize. What I wanted to do today is give you a couple of critical dates, and you'll see some of them have already passed, but I just wanted to remind those of you in case you haven't heard. Next Monday, we'll start the beginning of the IRS accepting e-file returns, despite what you might hear on the radio and TV ads that e-file has not begun. It will begin next Monday. But what you'll hear is our friends at TaxSlayer are allowing new returns to be started as of yesterday. And what that allows us as VITA partners to do is start creating returns for taxpayers in anticipation of the opening of e-file. But as I remind you there, and I'm sure Kim and Craig from TaxSlayer will remind you, the critical piece for us as volunteers to ensure accuracy is to make sure we open and review each return that we start prior to the 24th, prior to e-filing, to make sure we have taken into account any updates with the software. You'll see that last week that TaxSlayer did offer us the ability to start some of our FSA software for those who utilize that service. Again, those returns will not be e-filed until the 24th, when e-filing is available not only to us in VITA, but to all taxpayers. So next slide, and continue with key dates to remember. You'll see up there for those who work with our IRS Free File Alliance, they also opened their site for taxpayers to start preparation there on last Friday. But again, just re-emphasizing, those returns will not be e-filed until January 24th. Then looking ahead to a couple dates, a week from this Friday will be National EITC Awareness Day. Always a wonderful day within our community to emphasize the great ability of EITC to help support our families and children that we serve, but also to give a shout out to the wonderful work of VITA and TCE and ARP partners all across the country. So look for more information from your relationship manager on information to share on that day. And then last but not least, I hate for us to be already looking ahead, but I know some of you are, as am I. But the end of the filing season is a little asterisk this year. It is not Friday, April 15th. It is actually Monday, April 18th. And of course, always in tax law, we love exceptions, right? Except in the great states of Massachusetts and Maine, where it will be on Tuesday, April 19th, because of Patriots Day. And just for those who are curious, the reason it is not Friday the 15th is because the 16th of April is Emancipation Day and is a holiday in Washington, D.C., and that causes the tax filing date to be extended to Monday, April 18th. So next slide. I just want to, again, just give you some high level things to remember, and I hope you'll do that as you get ready to start your seasons. More than ever, e-filing is so critical. I know you'll hear from Nina, and she has great information. Irs processing delays not only will impact our filing season as we start on January 24th, but they continue to impact. There's still, as you know, millions of returns that still haven't been processed from last year. So I can't overemphasize how critical it is to not file a paper return except in those small cases where it's the only way you can file. I'll also really remind and recommend that we emphasize to our taxpayers how critical direct deposit is. Not only does it expedite a refund and provide higher security, there's always the possibility of a future advance payments. You'll hear from others talking about that. And so having that information with the IRS is just critical. And then down there, you see one last point. I know we feel like we haven't heard about economic impact payments for a while, but for those who did not get them for whatever myriad of reasons that they might not have gotten them, there will be again an opportunity to claim EIP payments, particularly EIP3, that they did not get when they file a 21 tax return. So I'll move on to the next slide. And I want to bring up two absolutely critical letters that I think are probably one of the most important things we can do as partners over these next few days as you get ready to open your VITA sites in full bore, is these two letters coming from the IRS. First, you see up there the 6419, which is just a letter that we have started mailing to taxpayers in late December, and we're continuing to issue them daily. They will provide the information on the total advanced child tax credit payments individual taxpayers have received. And this letter will also show how many qualifying dependents that the IRS used in their calculation. And then the second letter is the 6475, which is going to show the economic impact payments that a taxpayer received in 2021. And one of the reasons I wanted to really emphasize this to you, this is probably not one of those things that some of our taxpayers we've served over the years might think to bring. You know, they've gotten very comfortable bringing W-2s and 1099s, but whatever we can do to let them know we need these letters to be brought to the site, I think will really help all of us in the long term. So I'll jump down to the next slide, where you'll see why these letters are so important, because reconciliation to me is going to be the most critical thing we all hear and talk about this filing season. We need for each taxpayer we serve to reconcile the advanced child tax credit payments they receive, not only what they receive, but to make sure they get the remainder of what they're entitled to. The same with economic impact payments. And as you'll see on the slide there, I can't emphasize this enough to you that documentation will be the key. We as assisters to these taxpayers filing need to help them get this information correct. We need those letters, and if they don't have letters, we can try to help them find information in other places. You see there, to Irs Resources from the Child Tax Credit Update Portal, as well as Irs online accounts. I won't hide the fact that those are not going to be easy for many of your taxpayers to access. There's identification verification process that is challenging, but it is certainly a resource. And then obviously there are other means, bank records, other ways for them to document it. But I think it will be critical for all of us to emphasize it early and often. And I'll go to the next slide. And I think you won't be surprised why I think it's so critical to do this, because without the proper documentation and without the proper information, we're going to struggle to reconcile these amounts. And if these amounts aren't reconciled correctly to what the IRS states, the problem is going to be for our taxpayers. Those returns are going to get caught into what we term the manual error resolution process. And for those of you, and I know almost every single one of you has been a VITA volunteer, have found this to be impacted some or all the taxpayers you served last year, that process can take weeks, more likely months to play out. So I cannot tell you more succinctly that we need to help our taxpayers ensure they get this amount right. And so I'll say if we'll jump down to the next slide, when we have this issue come up there, what we need to do is to be an advocate for our taxpayers and tell them that they need to make sure they get this amount correct. And what I would even say to them is that they need to make sure that amount's correct, and if necessary, go back home. But I want to make sure we also know that everybody who received advanced child tax credit needs to file next year. They need to reconcile, even if they have no other filing status. And unfortunately, there will not be the non-filer portal option, so they will need to file, if you will, a regular return. But it's important not only to see if they're entitled to additional credits, but for some of those who might be worried that they might not have been entitled to those advanced child tax credits payments they received, you also will have the ability to file for some safe harbor exceptions by completing a tax return. So again, just absolutely important for us to get that information over to them. And so to my last slide, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of key resources that you can utilize throughout the filing season. IRS is trying to keep information as updated as possible. That first one up there talks to you about where we are on processing. And I think as we go through the filing season, that will give you an indication and might be helpful for you just to tell your taxpayers, hey, already IRS refunds are running slow, or whatever the information might be. And then the other two are about the child tax credit and about the economic impact payments. So I want to thank you again for being participating not only in this session, but for everything you're going to do for those you serve in this upcoming filing season. So thank you. And Darren, I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Don. We've got a few questions coming in from folks. So let me get to those really quickly. All right, so the first question comes from Annette Duncan, who asks, is it true that joint filers will receive individual letters and we should add them together, add the amounts together?
That's a great question. And to be honest with you, I'll just, as those who know me, I'll be as transparent as I can. It is one of the issues that we are still trying to finalize within spec, getting clarification. It appears to me that that is true, that individuals will, in the couple will get individual letters and we should add them together. But please look for more information from IRS and your spec relationship managers as we clarify that point further. And I apologize that I don't have specific information today.
No, thanks, Don. Asking another potentially hard question. What does a taxpayer need to do if they disagree with the amounts on those letters?
That is a tremendous question, and I was afraid somebody was going to ask that, and I'm glad Nina will be behind me to help you figure that out. What my recommendation is that the taxpayer needs to do what they think is correct. It is their tax return. My suggestion, as you heard in my presentation, is that I would ask them to do as much due diligence as possible to reconcile that amount before they file, whether that's reach out to the IRS, which is going to be incredibly challenging. But to me, more importantly, I think we as volunteers and as assisters just need to push back on them and say, this is what the IRS has. They certainly don't have to prove it to us, but I would tell them it could have a substantial impact on the processing of their return if they do not get these amounts right. And just as a reminder for all of us is that, you know, if the instance is the taxpayer says they received $3,000, the IRS says they received $3,600, and that taxpayer is entitled to a refund of $4,000 due to EIC and the remainder of their child tax credit, the IRS refund will be held for the entire amount, not the $600 difference that the two parties have on those amounts. So it's a critical issue, and I know Nina will address it more, and I appreciate her candor on that more than I can give you, because to me, it is up to the taxpayers, but I would solemnly suggest that the IRS information be the guidepost to begin.
Great, thanks, Don. That question came from Susan Barr, I believe you said, and I have not a question, but a best practice that I want to share as our last thing before we move on to the next presenter. This came from David Langley, and David just mentioned that he's been sharing information about the 6419 and the 6475 via social media newsletters so their clients can be prepared. and know to look out for those letters beforehand. So thank you all for the questions. We're going to move on to the next presenter. Y'all please keep them coming, and we'll present after that. But with that, we're going to pass it on to Nina. Thanks, Don.
Okay, thank you all. Greetings. I am actually in Paris, France. Leaving tomorrow from my vacation is ending. It's night here, so that's why I'm kind of dark. But I really wanted to talk to you all. I think you all know that I served as the National Taxpayer Advocate at the IRS for 18 years from 2001 to 2019. And when I retired from the IRS in July of 2019, on August 1st, I founded the Center for Taxpayer Rights. And the point of the Center for Taxpayer Rights is to really promote access to taxpayer rights and access to justice for U.S. taxpayers and international taxpayers. And one of the projects that we have is the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic Support Center, where we provide support to the low income taxpayer clinics around the country who represent for free the taxpayers that you are serving in the VITA sites when there are disputes with the IRS. And so that's sort of what I want to talk about. If there's one takeaway I want you to take away from my short talk this evening, is that you all as VITA sites, when you see problems, whether they are issues with the current year filing or in your intake, all of you should have an intake question that says, did you receive a notice, or was the EITC denied last year for you, or for the child tax credit for the last year? Then LITCs may be a referral source for you to get that taxpayer to your local LITC, low income taxpayer clinic, where they can get representation free of charge, and they themselves do not have to navigate the IRS. They have a representative, an attorney, a CPA, an enrolled agent who will represent them for free. And I'll say this several times, but the address for the LITC Support Center, where you can get a bunch of this information starting Monday and going on forward, is litcsupportcenter.org, litcsupportcenter.org. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is something that Don, or today, referenced earlier, which is what I call the choke points in the filing process. And where you have a taxpayer who thinks they got a different amount from the economic impact payment, or they never received that economic impact payment, or they got a different amount of child tax credit, or more commonly, someone else claimed the child in past years, and this taxpayer was entitled to the child tax credit under the law because the child lived with them for more than half the year, but they did not receive the advanced child tax credit, and the other taxpayer beats them to the punch in filing. And so I'm going to talk about those things, and my goal is for you to understand what you can do to self-help the taxpayer, but then secondly, when you need to refer the taxpayer to a low-income taxpayer clinic so that they can get the benefits that they deserve. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the situation I just described, which will result in an e-file rejection. Let's say that you filed married filing jointly in 2019 or 2020, and based on the law, the IRS paid it out based on that married filing jointly return. And let's say you are a survivor of domestic violence, and in 2021, after the 2020 married filing joint return is filed, or even if the abusive spouse filed a 2021 married filing joint return and it wasn't your return, but it's in the system, you know, that child tax credit is going, the advanced child tax credit is going to that abusive spouse, and you can't contact that abusive spouse for fear of your life or bodily harm. And that abusive spouse isn't going to go in and unenroll. So that taxpayer, who may very well be your client and who has the children for more than half the year, is coming into you and wants to claim the children. Well, the abusive spouse has e-filed and beat that person to the punch. Could be any another party that is e-filed and beaten the correct taxpayer who's entitled to the child tax credit and entitled to the earned income tax credit to the punch of e-filing. The IRS systems, as they are set up now, will reject that e-filed return from your client, even though they're the legitimate claimants, because there's already an e-filed return claiming those children. And in that case, your taxpayer is a conundrum. The only thing they can do is file a paper return. And as Don and everyone else has said, it's a disaster. The IRS hasn't finished filing millions of 2020 tax returns for individuals and businesses. So already this year, they're entering the filing system behind on processing paper and even individual electronic returns that have problems. And so, what do? Well, the taxpayer has two choices. They may be entitled to a refund based on their withholding. And so you may want to then, once you get the rejection notice, you may want to e-file a plain vanilla return for that taxpayer to get some money for them. But then what you need to do, and I know I'm asking you to do an additional step, but you've already prepared a return for them, claiming the dependency exemption, the child tax credit, and the earned income credit for the children. You've already done your due diligence that these children lived with them for more than half the year. Print out that paper return that you originally filed and give that to the taxpayer so that they can mail it to the IRS and write on it superseding return. And if that is filed by April 15th, even though it's paper, the taxpayer will still get their refund on the regular e-filed return based on withholding. But that paper return becomes the original return because it's filed by April 15th, and it will take a while to be processed. But in that case, then the taxpayer will be engaging in the IRS and can demonstrate that that child or those children lived with that taxpayer for more than half the year. And then the next step is you get that taxpayer to a low-income taxpayer clinic quickly, give them the information, and our website will have information where you can find out where the local taxpayer advocate clinic, the local the LITC, the local taxpayer, the LIT, the low income taxpayer clinic, I'm wearing so many hats, is for your state or your city so that you can get that taxpayer and they can get representation down the line when the IRS starts sending notices saying you have to prove that the children lived with you for more than half the year. We're not asking these people to do it themselves, but your job is to get that taxpayer to the right clinic so they can get the representation. And I'm asking you, if e-filed rejected, print out that return that was the original return that was rejected so the taxpayer can mail it and get it in the system by April 15th and get that process started so they actually ultimately get the full refund. Now, the other way things can get truly screwed up, where you may want to bring that taxpayer into the system and into the LITC system, is Don had referred to the manual error resolution process, or Irs, E-R-S, the error resolution system. To give you just a tiny little bit of background, in 2019, 0.5 million returns went to the error resolution system. In 2020, the year of COVID, 8 million went. In 2021, this past year, 22 million were in the holding queue in error resolution. Those were the numbers for the holding queue, where they were just in suspense because the IRS didn't have enough personnel to look at these returns. And there are a number of things that can go wrong with a return, including you don't have the right information, you don't have the right information per the IRS about what economic impact payment you received or what child tax credit you received. Let's go back to the domestic violence survivor. According to the IRS records, they paid out correctly based on the law, X amount, let's just say $3,000, to the joint account that was listed on the joint return. That went to the surviving, the abusive spouse. Your return, the survivor comes in and saying, I didn't receive a dime of advanced child tax credit. That's correct based on her reality. That return saying I received 0 and I'm claiming 3,000 advanced child tax credit because I had the children for more than half the year and I have met the relationship test and the age test and the support test and all of that, is going to go to error resolution because it needs to be reconciled. And then you're going to get a letter eventually, or you may get a math error notice. And if the taxpayer gets a math error notice, and it will very likely out of error resolution get a math error notice weeks down the line saying, you already received the advanced child tax credit, we're adjusting it, you only get $1,500 and blah, blah, blah. That means that the taxpayer has 60 days to call the IRS and say, I disagree with you, and I want you to come and look at my documentation. And at that point, the IRS will reverse what they've done, which is just disallow the child tax credit, and in turn, give you basically an audit. And again, that instance, if you get a taxpayer calling you about that, get them hence to an LITC. You know, don't ask the taxpayer to prove all that. The LITC will interact, will represent that taxpayer and represent them before the IRS, help them get the documentation together, present the information to the IRS so that the taxpayer isn't scared. The taxpayer doesn't give up. The taxpayer gives up and doesn't get the benefits to which they are entitled. So this is a lot of information. I'm not asking you to remember it, except to remember that you need to make referrals to the LITC. And if there's a reject return, really remember about printing out that paper return, telling the taxpayer to write superseding return on the top and mailing it to the IRS before April 15th so that you get it in the system. It may take a while, but eventually the IRS will process it, and it will be important to get that taxpayer then to an LITC. On litcsupportcenter.org, we will have a page that says in our menu, Resources. And under Resources will be a section called Know Your Rights for Taxpayers and Know Your Rights for VITA and Advocates. And that's where we are uploading, even as I speak, and it will probably take us all next week. So I regret to say it won't be up at the beginning of the filing season, but pieces will come up all next week, and we're continuing to upload them. Our fact sheets you can print out for the taxpayer saying, if you get a math error notice, this is what you need to do. If the IRS rejects an e-filed return because someone else has claimed your child, this is what you need to do. If you are a survivor of domestic violence, this is what you need to know. And we will then have, links for them to go and find their low-income taxpayer clinic that serves their area. We will also have for VITA and other stakeholders similar sheets, fact sheets, but they are more geared, maybe with a little bit more background, because we're really trying to make it simple for the taxpayers. A little bit more background for you all so you can understand where the return is in the system. And then when you can maybe do some self-help for that taxpayer, but when you really need to get somebody to an LITC so that that taxpayer gets the tax benefits that they are entitled to. And so with that, I think I'll stop and answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Nina. All right, so there's a few questions in here. First, I'm going to highlight a question from Charmaine Rodriguez. She asked, should we select that a dependent is not a dependent on the return to be able to submit that vanilla return and then process as suggested and work with an LITC? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. Yes, or I would say yes, or I would just say you just don't claim those children at all on the return. Now that may relate to head of household status, but that you could maybe get head of household status. But whatever you do, you're trying to get a plain vanilla return into the e-file system so that taxpayer can get the withholding, refund through direct deposit, and then submit the paper return that is claiming the children for purposes of whether it's EITC or the child tax credit, and writing superseding return on the top and mailing it to the appropriate mailing address. And that may take forever to process, but if you get it there before April 15th, under the law, that superseding return that's filed by April 15th becomes the actual original return. But theoretically, by that point, the IRS has at least already made the refund of the withholding. Now, if someone doesn't, has no income, right? And we're going to see 9 million of them maybe this year, where they're people that are eligible for the child tax credit, but they have no income, then there's no reason to file a plain vanilla return. Just get that paper return in claiming the children, and don't be deterred because someone else has claimed the child. You've done your due diligence. This taxpayer is eligible. They've shown you that the child lived with them for more than half the year and meets all the other tests. File that return and just manage the expectations of that taxpayer. That's going to take a while, and get that taxpayer to an LITC so that when the IRS starts sending notices, they're able to go to the LITC, and they have that LITC information, and they can call the LITC and get a representative, somebody to help them navigate this process and actually represent them so that they don't have to talk to the IRS. It's the LITC that will talk to the IRS on their behalf.
Great, thanks, Nina. There was another
So
question, folks are
so-
asking if you can remind them of the website that you mentioned that they should be looking for
Yes.
the resource.
Okay, so it's LITC supportcenter.org. And we literally just put the website up December 29th. So it's skeletal, but as we go on, we will be loading tons of stuff. And if you go there and you sign up for our newsletter, then we will be sending newsletters out just telling you we have just loaded this up. Come check it out.
Great, thanks, Nina. So you all submitted some outstanding questions that we didn't quite have time for. So we're gonna go on, but I wanna say thank you, Nina, and you all please keep submitting questions. We're gonna go on to the next presenter, which is Caitlin Donnelly from Nonprofit Vote.
Hello.
Hi, Caitlin, we hear you loud and clear.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Darren, Rebecca, and all the other presenters. I am really excited to be here with you all, and listening to those other presentations reminded me of all my tax woes when I was just an AmeriCorps member and really confused about my education award payments, and it was so difficult, and I really wish I had reached out to a VITA site to get some assistance. It would have saved me trouble years later, and just reminds me of the incredible work that you all are doing and the importance of that assistance. So I'll just share a little bit about Nonprofit Vote before I get into my appeal to you all to include voter registration in your activities this year. So if we can go to the next slide, Nonprofit Vote was founded in 2005, and we have worked with 501c3 organizations across the country since then, helping them to integrate voter registration and other voter engagement opportunities into their programs and services. And my almost single-minded purpose is to make this as easy as possible for nonprofit staff, tax assistance volunteers, and anyone else who wants to do nonpartisan voter engagement work, because I know this is not top of mind for you, and it's not top of mind for the clients that you are serving. So we want to make it as easy as possible and as seamless as possible for you to make sure those folks are able to register and vote. So we have helpful portals and resources on our website, nonprofitvote.org, and I will refer to a couple of those resources during my presentation today. Oh, there's my cat. Whenever I start talking, she likes to hop onto the desk. All right, so on my next slide, I want to get right into why do voter registration. So the first thing I'll talk about is need, access, and trust. So the individuals you are serving are primarily low income, of course, eligible for tax assistance. And when we look at this graph, this is based on the 2018 midterms. So that's the most comparable election to the one that we will have this year, also a midterm election. We see that only 40% of eligible voters making less than $30,000 a year turned out to vote. And you compare that with those who made over $50,000 who voted at a rate of 65%. So that is an enormous gap in turnout. And those are the folks that you serve. So there's a definite need there. There's also access. These voters are reaching out to you, seeking out your assistance for tax preparation. So you have the access to these voters. And lastly, they have a lot of trust in you. They trust you to handle their sensitive and complex tax forms. They rely on your assistance to get their tax returns, that money that is badly needed for them to maintain their homes and families and livelihoods. So you have that trust, and they will trust you to help them navigate the voter registration process, which is so much simpler than taxes. So you have access to this population who needs your help, and they already trust you. On the next slide, we have that it's encouraged by the IRS. So yes, you are allowed to offer voter registration and nonpartisan voter help. So the IRS affirmatively states that 501c3 organizations are allowed to conduct nonpartisan voter engagement activities. That includes registration, get out the vote reminders, anything that is not encouraging people to vote for a certain candidate or party is allowed. So nonpartisan voter engagement is allowable for all C3 organizations. And the NVRA, or Motor Voter Act, actually required agencies that assist applicants and clients in registering to vote when they're applying for federal assistance. So this doesn't exactly extend to VITA sites, but I bring it up because you're in good company, right? So when folks are applying for SNAP or EBT, they should also be given the opportunity to register to vote. So this is not a new thing. It's been around since 1993. Voters being assisted in getting registered when they are applying for some sort of federal assistance. And that includes healthcare, SNAP, EBT, and other forms of assistance. And then most importantly, SPEC has affirmed that VITA sites can promote voter registration and voter participation, and that this is very much aligned with the executive order issued in 2021 for there to be more assistance to voters around getting registered and turning out to vote. So we know that you have that access, you have that permission, but next slide. Another great reason to do it is that it's pretty simple and it's not going to slow you down. So the Brookings Institution conducted a study of VITA sites offering voter registration in 2018 and again in 2020, and they found that there was no difference in the rate of preparations completed when they compared the control shift, so when people weren't being offered voter registration opportunities, with the treatment shifts where they were. No measurable change in the rate of tax preparation. So this is not going to slow you down. It's not going to impact the quality of tax preparation or services you're able to provide. So it's, we are asking for, an extra step, for a little extra work, but it shouldn't be too much of an interference in what you're already doing in your primary mission. And lastly, it works. I could go on at length about the incredible turnout advantages and sort of gap closing that nonprofits and groups serving lower income voters have when they do engage the people they serve. The Brookings Institution study goes on in depth about who those voters are, and that they represent groups and communities that have long-standing gaps in voter participation, and that the treatment and offering the registration assistance did increase their turnout. And this lines up very closely with nonprofit votes research over the past 8 to 10 years, where we have looked at nonprofits doing voter engagement. It really narrows those participation gaps. It reaches the people who are most in need of these services and activities. So I won't go deep into that, but you can check out the Brookings study, and you can also look at our website. We have a nonprofit power report if you are interested in what those impacts are for, if you're at a nonprofit organization and want to look at this beyond just tax preparation assistance. So here is all the why. So let's talk about the how. Next slide. So I'm breaking it down into 4 steps. Hopefully 4 steps means it is simple enough. So you'll first need to get your registration forms and some guidance just to help make sure that you are complying with state and federal rules. You'll want to offer registration as an option before or after tax prep. I recommend you separate it out. Don't have it be happening during the filing process. Just before or after is best. When voters are filling out registration forms, if you're, the volunteer coordinator who is overseeing that and handing these forms and taking them back from voters, watch out for some common mistakes. I know quality is a high priority for VITA volunteers on tax forms, and it's very easy to use that same lens for the registration forms. And finally, you want to submit those applications regularly. So I'll go in a little deeper into each of these. Next slide. So finding the form, you can visit our site, nonprofitvote.org/voting in your state. We have an interactive map with links, and it will help you find your registration form for your state, although you could also use the federal form if you want to keep it super simple. We'll also have links to your state's voter registration portals if online registration is an option in your state. You can also learn more about the rules of voting and connect with your state or local election officials. I know that can feel like a bigger step to develop a relationship with those folks, but I do recommend it whenever possible so that if there's any follow-up, you already have a contact there. Next slide. So you want to offer registration as an option before or after tax prep. And unless your tax assistance process is fully virtual and digital and the clients you serve aren't going to be touching a pen and paper in your presence, we do recommend paper applications. We see lots of groups that try to start with digital, and it's actually just so much easier to fill out that piece of paper. There's not multiple screens, it's just one form filled out and then done. So you would include that form as part of intake or checking out. On the next slide, I have a little script, so you can just copy and paste this. You can print this out if you want to have a printout on top of the form, or you can say this to voters that in addition to tax preparation assistance, we are offering the opportunity to register to vote. You can choose to fill out this application if you wish to register or update your registration. We recommend updating your registration if you have moved or changed your name since you last voted. Many people do not know that if they have changed their name or if they have moved, across town, same town or city, just different address, they do need to update their registration because your registration should reflect your current address, your current residence. Definitely make this an opt-in activity, not required. I'm sure you offer tax assistance to people who may not be eligible for some reason, whether it's because they're underage, not a citizen, or perhaps they are, you're in a state where they have to, complete all aspects of a sentence if they've been convicted of a felony and maybe they're still on parole, right? And they're in a state where they have to finish that in order to vote. So there are some times that people may not be eligible. So of course you want to make it optional, and this is just an additional service that you're offering that they can choose to take advantage of or leave on the table. Next slide. So you want to do a little QC check if the voter does decide they want to fill out that registration form. Before they walk away, you want to do a quick visual check. First of all, can you read it? Have they written legibly? If you can't read it, the county clerk can't either. And then some really common mistakes we see all the time when people are filling out the registration form is they might miss the age and citizenship boxes. Those are commonly at the very top of the form, and it's very easy to just skip down, right, to the next boxes. So just double check that they have checked those off. Look down for the part where it asks for their date of birth. Make sure they've included their birth date and not today's date, whatever the date is. You know, we get a lot of people who just put in the day's date just in their haste, right? So make sure, because that's a big flag that, you know, if they say that they were born in, you know, February 2022, they're not eligible. So double check that. And lastly, that they've signed the form. People very frequently fill everything out and they forget to add their signature. And so that is required in order to have that application processed. Next slide. And lastly, you want to submit these forms regularly. We highly encourage you to submit them on behalf of the voter. Folks generally, even if they fill it out, that doesn't mean it's going to actually make it into the mail. So you can usually hand deliver these by dropping them off at your local election office, or you can mail them to either your state or local election office. If you have, you know, you're mostly working with very local voters and you know, send off a stack to the local election office and somebody from a different county ends up in that stack, the elections office will forward it on to the appropriate office. But if you are handling forms from all over the state, you might want to just send it to the state election office to keep it simpler for you. Now, if you're in Florida, New Hampshire, or Texas, you should not be taking those forms from voters unless you, in Florida or Texas, have approval to do so. In Texas, you can become a deputized registrar, which is a great thing, and I recommend that anyone in Texas just do that so they can help people in their county register. In Florida, you would have to apply to do third-party voter registration, and in New Hampshire, you are not allowed to do third-party registration, so you could provide the voter a federal form and they would have to turn that in themselves, which they can also do in Florida and Texas and any state. But again, it's a little less likely that it'll actually get turned in. All right, so I know I've gone through a lot. On the next slide, I just have my email address and our website. If you have questions, if you want assistance, if you need materials, please reach out. I'm really happy to assist in any way possible. We're also available to do more in-depth trainings if you want to, you know, to organize a training for your organization or for your state. But with that, I will pass it back to Darren for any questions.
All right, great. Thanks, Caitlin. All right, so we've got a few questions. The first one I'm going to ask is, you may have just addressed this, but I'll still ask it. I think it's a valid question just to clarify. Is there any paperwork or training that VITA sites need to go through to serve as a voter registration site? I called my state office. They had no idea what I was talking about. They sent me to a local office. However, we cover multiple locations. Basically, is there anything VITA sites need to do this?
So, I mean, it really depends on the state. Most states don't require any specific training. Many states do offer optional training, which it can be nice. And again, building that relationship with your local election office, I think, is always a plus. But I love the voter registration drive guides that are put out by Fair Election Center. They're like one page and they tell you everything from, you know, this is how fast they need to be, you know, submitted, to whether you have to have some sort of training, etc.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. All right, so next question is, and this is something that could happen at many VITA sites. Brent Stewart asked, how do we handle clients that say, not today?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I'd say is, if to that voter is the form only takes less than a minute to fill out, and we'll handle it for you so you don't have to worry about it later. If they're really not interested, don't force it, don't push them. It's not your job to do that. But I think it's helpful to emphasize, it's easy, and do it now so that you don't have to worry about it in October or November, right? When the midterms will be held. But in most states, if it's already November, it's too late to register. There's only a handful of states that offer same-day registration. So that's what I'd say. You might also refer them to a site like vote411.org, where they can get on there in their own time, register, learn a lot more about voting in their state as well.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. All right, so I have one more question that's been asked by a few different folks throughout the presentation that I want to make sure that I address, and that is just that the slides and today's presentation will be available with all the resource links, and they'll be shared after to everyone who registered. So you all please be patient. We've also been trying to drop links in the chat where we can, so hopefully you've been able to see those resources, but if not, you will get the presentation afterwards and be able to refer to everything there. With that, I think that's all we have time for today for Caitlin. So Caitlin, thank you so much for coming out. Really, really appreciate you. Let's get some folks registered to vote. It's going to be great. I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker, which is Craig Smith from TaxPayer.
What's up, everyone? Craig here with TaxPayer, of course. So Kim and I, mostly me, are going to be talking to you today about some of the TaxPayer updates. And what we really wanted to highlight was Customer Portal. We talked about that a lot over the past few months, that it was going to be a new feature available to TaxPayer by the TCE sites. And so, it's out there. If you have placed an order, your site's activated, you can now get into the program, get your hands on it, play with it, and actually see it. It's always a big difference to hear me talking about it. Even during the enhancement webinar I did in December, where I actually got to show it to you, it's still a whole different world when you actually get to have your hands on it and play with it yourself. So what we wanted to do is just reiterate the Customer Portal, point that out again, highlight the intent behind it, the purpose, how it can help your site. And then, of course, we'll take any questions that you have at the end. So let's go to, I guess, the second slide. We'll skip the first one and go straight to the second one. Next slide. All right, so the purpose of the Customer Portal. It's got a lot of different purposes, and we've listed them here for you. It allows the taxpayer to upload electronic documents to the preparer, to the site. It supports multiple different file types. You can upload anything from your desktop, your laptop, your iPad, your mobile phone, take pictures, upload that. A lot of flexibility there. The taxpayer can actually sign digitally their documents that are going to be transmitted to the IRS, and we'll look at that later. And it allows the preparer themselves to actually make available to the taxpayer a copy of their tax return before it gets quality reviewed and after it's been signed by the taxpayer. The Customer Portal also provides a chat feature between the taxpayer and their site, so that's going to come in handy if there needs to be any communication back and forth between a tax preparer and the taxpayer themselves. And one of the biggest benefits, at least for the taxpayer, normally at a traditional site, they come in, get their return prepared, and it gets transmitted. The taxpayer goes on about their day, and at some point, they get a deposit in their bank account or a check in the mail, or they've made arrangements to make a payment to the IRS or their state while they're at the site. So the Customer Portal is going to provide, and it's not quite out there yet, it's being actively worked by development, but through the taxpayer point of view in their Customer Portal, they'll be able to actually see the status of their federal and state returns. So after they've been transmitted, they can check it out, see if it's been accepted or rejected. Next slide. So Customer Portal access, one thing, big question we always get is how do we have access to it? How do we get our hands on it at our site? And the good news there is it's available to every single TaxPayer Pro online site that's placed an order for 2021. So if you have a site, you have access. Now, every site does have access to the customer portal, but note, preparer access to the portal is dependent on security templates. Now, every security template that we've delivered with the software that y'all should be used to by now, all those templates have been updated to include access to the customer portal. But note, if you are creating your own templates at your site or have existing templates from previous years that you use, make sure you go, take a little bit of time as the site administrator to update those security templates to provide access to the customer portal, as well as the scan documents feature for any of those templates that you think should have access to these particular features. And we mentioned scan documents here because you'll see as we get a little bit forward in this presentation that customer portal and scan documents do work hand in hand together to make it work for everyone. So next slide. So there's two different viewpoints of the customer portal, two different aspects. There's a preparer side of things, and then of course the taxpayer side of things. So up front, the preparer first needs to basically create a link for the taxpayer. So preparer access to the customer portal is only made available after they initially get through the personal information section of a tax return. So they go ahead and start the return, plug in taxpayer, spouse if there is one, dependents, that kind of stuff. And then once they get into the actual main meat of the program itself, they have access to then create a customer portal link for a taxpayer. Now, there's three access points here, and you can see the screenshots. There's on the left navigation panel of the program, the drop-down menu at the top of the page, as well as on the very last page of e-file on the submission page, there's an access point there to create a customer portal link for a taxpayer. Now, I always say this when I was talking about the customer portal, some of the questions we get are, well, at this point, after I get through personal information, is this my only opportunity to create a customer portal for a taxpayer? Because we may not, know if we need to utilize the portal at that particular point in time, or what if the taxpayer leaves or comes to the site and forgets a tax document or gets one later on in the mail? How do we handle that if we only have this one access point? The customer portal link is available at any point after completing that personal information section of the return. So there's not once you see it, if you don't take advantage of it, you can't get back to that area. It doesn't work like that. So it's always going to be available in that taxpayer's return if you need to create a portal for a taxpayer. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide so we can take a look at how we actually get the customer portal to a taxpayer. So again, like I mentioned, just a second ago, the preparer themselves at the site do need to instigate creating a customer portal for the taxpayer. As I mentioned, it's a two-part thing. You got the preparer side as well as the taxpayer side. So if you are going to utilize a customer portal for a taxpayer at your site, after you create that link, you're going to get a screen like this where you're going to plug in the phone number and email address for that taxpayer. Now, one of the updates you'll see in the program in the next, I don't know if it'll be Friday, but definitely by next week or during next week, we will be relocating the preparer or taxpayer email address input field. If you're familiar with it, it's been in the e-file section of the return, and it's going to stay there, but we're going to duplicate that entry into the personal information menu of the federal return as well. So that way, on the same page, you'll be able to capture both the phone number and the email address for that taxpayer if you need to. And so if that information is captured, once you go to create a customer portal link, we'll actually autofill the phone number and email here, so you don't have to worry about typing that in again as the preparer. And so what you do is you plug in the phone number, you plug in the email. It's got to be at least one, doesn't have to be both. But since if that information is available, we're going to fill it in. All you really got to do there is click that continue button, and on the next screen you'll see what's going to be sent to the taxpayer. So let's go on to the next slide. All right, so you click the continue button, and you get on your view as the preparer in the program, the link has successfully been sent. So at this point, it's already en route. It's probably already been delivered to the taxpayer. It's either going to go to their email address or the phone number that's listed on that prior screen. Now, if both of those options are provided, phone number and email, the default delivery method will be the email address. And if we go to the next slide, we'll take a look at what it would look like, what your taxpayers need to be on the lookout for if they're going to be utilizing the customer portal. So they're going to get an email or text message from taxstatusnow.com. So it's not going to come from TaxSlayer Pro Online or TaxSlayer by the TCE address, anything like that. It comes from taxstatusnow.com with the subject header, your secure portal has been created. And when they open up the email itself, it's very basic, very simple. It just has a link, says click here to access your portal. So as the taxpayer, I would then click that link. And now once you click the link, it doesn't turn into a dead link or anything like that. So they can always come back, click it again if they need to. Now, one question we always got, at least when I was presenting it live back in December, is on that second screenshot on the bottom, it says, please reply to, and then it lists an email address. You know, that's the email address of the preparer that was actually displayed there. So that's been hidden as of this morning, I believe. Kim can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So rest assured, if you are sending this link to taxpayers, they're not going to see your email address anymore. So there we go. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so I got to kick it up. So at this point, the taxpayer just creates their own account, create a login, create a password, and provide some information to make sure it matches the return before they can continue. So let's go to the next slide. Once they finalize their account, they do have to MFA, just like y'all do in TCE. That's pretty self-explanatory. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is the taxpayer point of view. This is what their account's going to look like. And there's just three main sections, My Files, Preparer Files, and Messages. That just allows the taxpayer to upload documents so that the preparer can see them. The Preparer Files is where the taxpayer can see files shared with them from the preparer. And then, of course, the Messages is that chat feature where you can communicate back and forth. Next slide. And that's just a quick view of how it looks when a taxpayer uploads documents. So let's move on to the next slide. This is what the preparer file looks like via scanned documents. So as a preparer, when you're logged into a return, if you access the scanned documents of that taxpayer, that's where you're going to locate any of those documents that have been uploaded by the taxpayer. Next slide. And of course, this is just a quick screenshot of the chat feature. And if we go to the next slide, I can show you where, as a preparer, you'll see that information. So as you log into TaxSlayer Pro Online as a preparer or someone with access to Customer Portal and Scanned Documents in their template, you'll see that orange bar that says Show Chat, and it'll list the number of unread messages you have, if there's any. That's going to be at the bottom page of the main login at the main page of the site for TaxSlayer Pro Online. Let's go to the next slide. And that's just a quick view of what it looks like from the preparer side of things. That's what your chat looks like. So let's go to the next slide. All right, the ability to make tax documents available for the taxpayer. This particular button is located on the submission page of eFile, and it's only going to be available to you as a preparer if the taxpayer has successfully created their customer portal account. So they got the email, they registered their account, that's all they need to do. So if you don't see this button here and you're trying to share a document with the taxpayer, they haven't yet created their customer portal, so you might want to reach out and get them to go ahead and do that so you can share documents with them. So let's move on to the next slide. And that's what it looks like if I was a preparer and I made available a copy of the tax return to the taxpayer. This is me as a taxpayer logging in, and that's what I would see to view my tax document. It's got all the file name can't be changed, and it looks as weird as it does and long because it's encrypted. So that's kind of how part of the encryption process is nice, long, jumbled file name type like that. So let's go ahead and keep moving on. Next slide, please. This is how the taxpayer signs the return. So within their customer portal, they do have the option to add a signature. And then once they click the sign button, it is applied to all the necessary documents in the tax return. So let's continue to the next slide. That's what the preparer would see on the submission page of eFile. So once a taxpayer has signed their return, this is a visual indication and confirmation for you as a preparer that they've actually done it. They signed the documents, and if you generated a PDF which I believe we'll see on the next slide. You'll see that digital signature on the PDF of the return. So that's just a copy. And before we hop into the questions real quick, if there is any, as the taxpayer digitally signs their return, they add that signature to their portal account. This is where it's going to be applied to automatically. So it's going to go to the 8879. It's going to go to the 1040. Any custom consents that you have at your site that need to be addressed, if they're granted, and then the state returns. So state returns on the PDF, those will also be signed as well. And that is my last slide, and it looks like I'm right at 3:15, so perfect. Ready for any Q&A we may have.
Great, Craig, very well done. All right, so I've got a few quick questions for you. You all had some great questions, so I'll start off with this one from Rick Mallory, who asked, is the chat feature only available to the tax preparer, or can the quality reviewer and or the site coordinator have access as well?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So initially, it was just between the preparer and the taxpayer. So now it's anybody that has access to that return at the site can also chat with the taxpayer back and forth. So yeah, preparer, quality reviewer, whoever.
Perfect, thank you. All right, this next question comes from Leticia. Oh, Leticia C. Y'all forgive me with the last names. All right, so the question is, can a customer portal be created after the tax return has been e-filed so that you are able to send them their tax return?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
All right, perfect. And the next question here is, we created it. So this is from David Langley, who created a DIY tax prep guide, purposely focused on TaxSlayer FSA, and they included a Spanish language version of the guide. They've been trying to find taxpayer support articles to support. They are linking to some taxpayer support articles in Spanish, but are having trouble finding all of the articles in Spanish, and they're wondering, is there an easy place to find that? That's the spirit of their question.
So Spanish translated support guides for the most part for FSA product. To be honest, I don't know off the top of my head. That's something I'm probably gonna have to circle back on to get a definitive answer out there.
All right, perfect. Yeah, David, feel free to email me. I'll drop my email in the chat, and then happy to pass on that answer from Craig. All right, great. And looking through questions, I think I'll pause for now and open it up. So we've got a few extra minutes built in because the facilitators did a great job of staying on time. So I want to open up and return to questions from a few different sections. So this is a bit of a audible at the last minute for those that are presenting. So for any presenters that are still on, feel free to come on and share your camera if you'd like. I have one or two questions for a few folks that have spoken before that I'm going to highlight, as well as a few more may come in for you too as well, Craig. So first off, Don, I know you wanted to make a point about voter registration, so I wanted to give you a second to have the mic.
Great, thanks, Darren. And it was an excellent presentation by Caitlin. I just wanted to affirm from an IRS spec perspective, consistent with everything we do in the spec organization when it comes to VITA, that there can be no prerequisite of a taxpayer to get their taxes done free. So one of the questions was, if the taxpayer says they won't do voter registration, what do we do? And what I wanted to re-emphasize is, one thing you cannot do is deny them the ability to get their taxes done for free. But otherwise, as Caitlin absolutely said, we inspect, if you will, approve of folks doing voter registration information. I know a lot of sites have been concerned about that, but absolutely that is an approved process that sites are able to use.
Great. All right. I want to point out one more thing. It was in relation to Nina's presentation. So Nina talked about low-income taxpayer clinics, and my colleague Graham wanted to just let you all know, to give you a quick heads up, he put this in the chat also, that he's had a few VITA sites have success bringing in low-income taxpayer clinic staff to their site. And if you have any questions about that, or if you would like to hear about best practices from Graham and things that he's seen, feel free to email him, and his email is in the chat. It's goneil@prosperitynow.org. I also can speak to that very briefly. One of the tax sites that I ran in Miami, our low-income taxpayer clinic was in the same building as us, and it led to us like forming a relationship and becoming really tight partners so that we could make referrals. So that when they moved out, eventually they moved something like 10 miles away to a different office space, but we were able to kind of maintain that relationship and make sure that clients were easily referred to them when it was appropriate. Great. So there's another question I wanted to ask. Let's see. Okay. Here, y'all, I wanted to ask, okay, this is maybe a Don question. For children that are shared by parents in alternating years, what advice should we give them in order to process their returns this year? One parent received the advanced child tax credit, but it belongs to the other parent.
Just could pretend like I was on mute and couldn't answer that, but that's going to be one of those questions that I referred to in my presentation, that we're going to have to sit down with the law and make the determination. And I do know a lot of people have been doing this off and on, every other year, and the legality of that is often in question. So, the best I can say in that case, because of course in every situation it's going to be based on the facts and circumstances of the individual taxpayers, we're just going to have to go down. And I was on a call with some other VITA colleagues earlier today, and one of them, they asked what the most recent book she read was. She said the 40-12, and there you go. Go back to our documentation, go back to our flow charts, who's entitled to the children, and then I think you have to then weave into that conversation from some of Nina's points about, this may be one where somebody beat them to the punch and claimed children they shouldn't have. And like I said, I think we're going to have to take each and every one of them on a facts and circumstance case, but most importantly for us, because we're in the quality business of doing accurate returns, we're going to have to follow the law. And I do anticipate this being a significant issue of people just coming out of the woodwork trying to claim children because of the publicity and the amount of money we're talking about. So I apologize, I don't have a absolute answer, but I think we're just gonna have to be very cognizant of that issue throughout the filing season.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you for taking time to address that as best you could, Don. This is a question that came up during Nina's section, so I feel like it's more for Nina, but she has dropped off because of Paris time, which is fair. But I do like the spirit of this question, so I'm just going to elevate it to you all. And I believe David asked this, but David Langley, the question was, is there a place organizations or individuals can advocate for the IRS to receive more funding so that they can have the staff they need to be able to do the best job that they can? And I think it's a great question. I love the spirit of advocacy and advocating to really help taxpayers by raising that the thing that they might need is just to be able to more easily access the IRS. I don't know of any particular place where you can elevate that, but we are gonna, before the presentation ends, we're gonna talk about our advocacy center at Prosperity Now and talk about how that works a little bit. So there'll be like a quick 2-minute chat about that, so we can talk about if you were to want to elevate that and create a campaign about that, how you would do it. All right, with that, I see 1 or 2 more questions came in. Folks are thanking you all for your answers as well. Folks are saying thank you for that. All right, so Craig, this question's for you. Did you state that if a preparer can upload, did Craig state if a preparer can upload taxpayer filer documents to that account? If so, does the preparer do so from the preparer account, or can it only be done by the taxpayer/filer? Apologies if I missed this.
So I'll kind of give a general answer here. And I think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, a new feature that came out this morning with Customer Portal, initially preparers could only, it was a click of a button, they could share a copy of the tax return with the taxpayer who would access it through their own portal login. As of this morning, a preparer can, via scanned documents, upload additional documentation. Like, so if they needed to share anything back in addition to the tax return itself to the taxpayer, they can utilize scanned documents to upload anything else. So they're, I guess, in a sense, taxpayer and preparer can essentially share documents back and forth. Yeah. Kim said that was correct, so I'm on the right track.
All right,
and also,
great.
I will say, just to add to that, sorry, Kim has posted a lot of great blog posts today and yesterday regarding customer portal and the new updates that have come out. So definitely, if you're familiar with the VitaTC blog, or if you're not, check it out. A lot of good stuff is always there. And I did blow through my slide deck pretty quick. So if you want more about customer portal as a whole, Practice Lab under Section 6, we have the enhancement webinar that I did about customer portal, as well as a user guide and a short video as well. So a lot of material out there to help you out.
Awesome, thanks, Craig. So with that, y'all, we're going to end the Q&A section. Let's go on to the next slide. Thank you again, Craig, Don, Nina, Caitlin. I appreciate you all. So there was this great question around advocacy and what you could do to elevate advocacy concerns. So let's go on to the next slide. All right, so to speak to that question that I believe was from David, Prosperity Now has this has our advocacy center where you can email a legislator directly, you can call a legislator, you can tweet a legislator, as well as schedule a meeting or sign a petition or get other folks to sign a petition. This is meant to be a catch-all place to make advocacy really easy and a low lift for you, your constituents, your partners. So to this question of who can you elevate to this kind of concern to get IRS more funding? Your legislator is a great place to start, and this is a place where you can do that. So you all please feel free to go to prosperitynow.org/takeaction to learn more about that and to engage with the center. Next slide. All right, so with that, y'all, we've made it to we've run the gauntlet. We've made it to the end. So I've got a few next steps for you all to consider as we kind of close out this session. So first, I want you all to just think hard and make time for the things that you learned today. This was a really informative presentation with a lot of presenters and a lot of information. The slides will be posted afterwards, so you'll get a chance to review them. In addition to that, you can visit our advocacy center to kind of elevate your own advocacy concerns and efforts. There will be a survey sent out. And lastly, if you're not already a member, please join the Tax Roundtable Listserv. This is a great place where you'll find partners, advocates sharing timely information, updates, things that they think that others in the field should know. So for example, I had learned, I think I learned very quickly when the tax filing open date was, because it was posted there very quickly after it was publicly announced. So you all, please remember to access the resource. So I'm going to put the link to join the Tax Roundtable in the chat. Oh, I think I said that privately to Don. Let me send it to everyone. And then lastly, lastly, I just want to thank you all for coming out and making time today. Tax season is about to become very busy, so I can't say enough how much I appreciate you taking time out of your days to attend this webinar and be a part and actively engage with us. Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Darren.